afternoon to this Q&A session for the 2024 applications to the Clore Fellowship. My name is Kate Atkinson. I'm Head of Programmes at Clore Leadership, and I'm really delighted to be hosting today's session. A couple of housekeeping things before we get started. You'll see on screen we've got sign language interpretation. There's also captioning if you want to access that. You can find the instructions for captioning for today's session in the chat. So do access those if they are useful for you. We are recording today's session, just to let you know. So if you want to stay on camera, you're absolutely able to. If it's your preference to turn off camera, that's absolutely fine too also. As we go, I'm asking that if you want to put any questions that you might have in the chat. So the format of today's session is I'll do a short presentation, talk a little bit about the fellowship and also how applications are working this year. Then I'm going to hand over to alumni from the Clore Fellowship who will speak to Robyn and Adem, who are going to share some of their experiences and the impact for them of taking part in the Clore Fellowship. And then at the back end of this session, there'll be lots of time to answer questions that you might have. I know some have submitted questions in advance and I've got my sheets here. I'm hoping to answer as many of those as we go. But if you do have individual questions that aren't answered through the presentation, please do pop them in the chat and we'll get to as many as we can by the end of the session. And just to reassure, if there's any that we don't get to, myself or the Clore team will post the answers after this session as well. So don't worry if your question, we don't get to it, we will make sure it gets answered by the team. So as I said, I'm Kate Atkinson, I'm Head of Programmes at Clore Leadership, and part of my role is overseeing all the programmes that Clore Leadership runs. And I'm really delighted that the Clore Fellowship is a long-standing element of our programme and one that we're really proud of. And this Q&A today focuses on applications to the fellowship, but please do check out our website for other programmes as well. We're always offering a whole raft of different programming bits, short form courses, webinars, but also our residential programme. So please do have a look at that as well. Could somebody start the presentation, please? Thanks, Lucy. Can I have the next slide, please? So a little bit of information first then about the Clore Fellowship. The fellowship programme is very much a framed bespoke programme of bespoke leadership development for cultural sector leaders. So by that, what I mean is that there are standard elements to the fellowship. There are common experiences that the fellowship cohort will go through. But also there is real opportunity within the fellowship for an individual to steer, shape and craft their own leadership development journey. And that happens in a variety of different ways, and we'll talk a little bit more about that later on. It's an annual programme, and each year we offer circa 24 fellowships for each cohort. And I'll talk a little bit later about the makeup of some of the fellowships that we have on offer this year. In terms of the bookend timings, the 2024 fellowship will start in September 2024 and will run through to May 2025. And that's the period through which fellows will undertake their leadership learning. This year, applications are open to both UK and international leaders. And this Q&A today, I'm specifically focusing on the applications to the UK and Irish fellowships. Applicants from international applicants from across the world are able to apply through a partnership that we run with the Chevening Secretariat and also through the Hong Kong Arts Development Trust. So if you are an international applicant, I would suggest that you check out the information on our website for applications from overseas. In terms of broad brush criteria for a fellowship application, we're looking for a minimum of 7 years experience in culture, and that can be in any aspect of arts and culture. And we have had a question about whether that 7 years needs to be consecutive. It doesn't. We understand that experience, professional experience can look like many things. There may be periods when you are taking time out, undertaking learning, you might be having family, and that's absolutely fine. That experience can run over any kind of period. It doesn't have to be consecutive years. The only exception to the 7 years minimum is for our Accelerate early year career fellowships, of which there is a minimum experience requirement of 5 years. So 7 years in the main for the main fellowships and 5 years for Accelerate. To put in an application for this fellowship, you do need to meet our general eligibility criteria, and they are detailed on our fellowship web pages. And I will speak about the eligibility criteria a little later on as well. And just to add that in addition to the general eligibility criteria, which all applicants need to meet, there are some specific requirements for individual fellowships that you might want to apply to. And sometimes they are to do with geographical region that you might be based or working within. They might be to do with art form that you have a specialism in or you may be working in. So there are specific as well as the general eligibility criteria. And I would really strongly suggest that before you make your application, you carefully read and digest through all those criteria to make sure that you really meet the needs of the specific fellowship to which you're applying. We do encourage very much applications from global majority applicants, as well as deaf, disabled and neurodivergent leaders. We're really keen to have applications come through from those groups which we know are underrepresented more widely within cultural sector leadership. And I'll speak to some of the information around access specifically for deaf, disabled and neurodivergent leaders when they may be coming on the fellowship a little later on. In terms of the experience, going back to that 7 years minimum experience, as I see there's a question around how and where that experience needs to lie. We at Clore leadership for us is really about any aspect of working within the cultural profession. So it's around, you might be a freelance artist, you might be a freelance producer, you don't necessarily need to be leading or managing a team. We recognise sometimes that folks are not working within organisational structures and hierarchies. That is absolutely fine. We are not solely looking for senior leaders of big organisations. You might be working for a much smaller organisation. You may be within a middle management role, and the variety of roles that fellows, you know, have as part of their employment portfolio. It can really vary. We have had fundraisers who've been fellows, we've had artists, producers, chief execs, artistic directors. The roles are really varied. There is no criteria around specifics even of roles. Next slide, please. So in terms of what the fellowship entails, the overarching framework looks the same for each fellow. But as I said previously, the content and the direction that fellowship will take will be bespoke to that individual. So within the framework, we have 2 residentials that all fellows will come on. The first is in September 2024, and that's really an opportunity for you to get to know yourself and your other fellows on your cohort and start to really tapping into your leadership learning and understanding who you are and what your leadership potential is. And the final residential will happen in May 2025. The dates for all the residentials and all the whole cohort activity are on our website. So if you want to put those dates in your diary, they are there. We will also offer a series of residential skills workshops, and they will take place in January 2025, and they will take place in London. We have a climate assembly, which will be running online in February 2025, and that's an opportunity for what will be the Clore 20 fellowship cohort to come together, but also to work alongside fellows from previous years as well. You will undertake a 360 leadership profile. So the idea about that is to start to, through feedback from others around you in your professional sphere, to find out a little bit more about who you are as a leader, to start that journey of self-reflection. All fellows also undertake as part of their fellowship a 6-week secondment in a host organisation. This is an opportunity for fellows to really step outside of their day job, to find themselves within a context which is very different to the one that they work in professionally day to day. It's an opportunity for stretch and learning around different aspects of leadership that you might not ordinarily encounter. And the Clore team will help with identification of that secondment. We have a long list of hosts who've expressed an interest in hosting a secondment placement. So we will match you up and look at where your preferences might be, some of your aspirations for learning. There is also the opportunity to source an off-list secondment if you have a burning desire to kind of have a secondment place in something that isn't within that long list. And in terms of the secondment, there is some flex in terms of timing and what that looks like. Some fellows have undertaken that very much face-to-face, in situ within organisations. Others have done it a bit more remotely. Others have taken a bit of a mix and match approach, some face-to-face, some remote time. And in terms of the scheduling and timetabling of that secondment, it's very much up for discussion and negotiation between the fellow and the host. You will have a conversation with your host about what works, maybe around a particular project that you might be kind of embedded into, or it might be a strategy piece that you'll work with your host on. So it's very much a negotiation around what you're able to, where the time commitment is needed and what you're able to offer as a fellow as well. You will also, as part of your fellowship, receive a development budget. And this is where a fellow is able to really dig into the individual aspect of their learning, something that really is bespoke to them. So each fellow will devise a plan about how they wish to spend that £4,000. We're able to support a range of different activities with that budget. It might be, for example, accessing training courses. It might be buying a subscription to a particular learning resource or a journal. It may be travel costs to undertake study visits. It might be, you might want to go on some visits and visit a group of different leaders, have some coffees and chats with them and really pick their brains and interrogate how they work as a leader and learn more about them, see their work, see them in action. It might be attending a conference. It's really flexible what that development budget might look like. So we're really able to kind of look individually at a fellow's journey and tailor it accordingly from that budget. You'll also receive focused support. So that will be either through a coach or a mentor, and we will support a fellow in identifying which of those two options feels like the best option for them. We have a coaching register, so we will support fellows in identifying a suitable coach for them. And we also have a list of mentors from folks working all across different aspects of arts and culture. So there will be some pairing that we're able to support in that respect as well. There is also bursary support for you as a fellow or your employer, and that depends on your employment circumstance. If you're freelance, self-employed, that bursary will come to you. If you're on PAYE, employed by an organisation, that bursary will be used by your employing organisation to backfill. So that £14,000 is to be used as either backfill costs or to support your living costs while undertaking the fellowship period. The provocation piece, this is one element that comes toward the latter part of your fellowship and is really an opportunity to dig down into a research project of your choice. We ask that the provocation has a thematic link to leadership development, as you would imagine. This is the leadership programme. But really what direction that piece goes in is very much up for the fellow to choose. It might be an area of inquiry that they have been interested in and have a lifelong interest in that particular direction. It might be that something emerges through the course of their fellowship. The choice is really up to an individual fellow. And that research piece doesn't necessarily have to be written in format. We have fellows who've undertaken a more creative piece. It might be an audio piece, a film. It's very much up for discussion what the format of that piece will take, but there is flexibility. The collaborative inquiry is another aspect of the fellowship which groups undertake as a cohort. So we will place fellows in small subgroups, and we'll give you a knotty, thorny leadership question that's live for the sector at the moment. And as a subgroup, you'll kind of get your hands on that question and create a response to that question, which is then presented at the final residential to the rest of the group. And the aim there is to, as the name would suggest, to collaborate on an issue of leadership, to inquire into it, and also to share your learning with the rest of the cohort. So that's the collaborative inquiry. There is also, towards the end of the fellowship, the possibility to apply for some Arts and Humanities Research Council supported research. So Clore Leadership has a long-standing relationship with the AHRC, and for fellows, we're able to offer the opportunity to apply to undertake a piece of academic research supported by an academic research supervisor from a higher education institution in the UK. And as a fellow, you're able to access that opportunity to apply for up to 3 times. So once you're alumni fellow as well, you can still put in an application for that. So that is the AHRC supported research. And then, as I mentioned earlier, we're really keen for more applicants from deaf, disabled and neurodivergent people. As part of the access on the fellowship, we will work with a fellow to identify any access requirements that they feel they may need to support them on a fellowship. So this might look like different things depending on, what an individual's access requirement might be. We have supported fellows previously to have sign language interpretation on residentials. We have supported the costs of an ADHD coach to support working through individual logistics and planning for a fellowship and to kind of access the learning. We have also supported fellows who are parents with costs for childcare or other caring responsibilities, be it on residential, but also possibly throughout the course of the fellowship. So access support can look like many different things, and we will have a conversation with fellows at the beginning of the fellowship to identify what your requirements might be and any support you might need as well. Next slide, please. So, as I mentioned before, there are a range of different fellowships that we offer each year. And each year, those fellowship opportunities will change, and that is dependent on the funding that we have in place. So there are some changes year on year. You're able, within your application, to apply for up to 2 fellowships. You don't have to apply for up to 2. You can apply for just 1 if you meet the eligibility criteria really squarely for 1. But there is the option to apply for 2 if you wish. We will consider your application for both, providing you meet the eligibility criteria. It is really strongly competitive, the application for the Clore Fellowship. So if you feel that, oh, I'm not quite sure whether I meet the eligibility criteria for my second fellowship, shall I put it in as a bit of a punt? I would suggest that you stick to the ones where you squarely meet the eligibility criteria, because the competition will be really, really fierce. So for 2024, the fellowships that we are able to offer are a cultural learning fellowship, and this is supported by the Claude Winfield Foundation. And this is for those working in learning, outreach, participation, education, community focused work of any kind. We have had questions about whether there's any requirements about the age range of those participants of the work that you might be working in. There is no specifics around that. It can be in any age group. It could be learning and participation work with older people, could be with children, could be early years. There's no restrictions around that. And it might be that you're in a delivery facing role as a leader or change maker, or you're maybe in a more administrative role or a strategic role. There is no criteria around what the role needs to look like. New for this year, we have a Culture and Climate Fellowship. We're delighted to bring this into our roster, which is supported by the Linbury Trust. And this is for those working in arts and culture who've got a focus on climate issues very squarely as part of their leadership work or their practice. So you might be an artist whose work really focuses in around issues to do with climate emergency, or you might be working for an organisation that's using arts and culture as a vehicle for advocacy around the issues around climate. The Duffield Fellowship, as you would imagine, supported by the Clore Duffield Foundation, is for those who are working or aspiring to work as a leader within medium to large scale organisations. So that's 150 employees plus, so some of the really big organisations. And you need to be demonstrating when you're asked about the eligibility criteria that you are passionate and committed to exploring that as part of your leadership to working in those larger scale organisations. Accelerate Fellowship, we talked a little bit about earlier. This is for individuals who are earlier on in their career, would have 5 years plus. So those who are kind of starting out earlier in their journey. We also have specialist art form fellowships for those working in curatorial practice, supported by John Ellerman, in dance. And this is specifically for current or former professional dancers or choreographers. So the Dance Fellowship is supported by Dancers Career Development Trust and the Limbury Trust. And we also have a fellowship for visual arts as well, supported by Adem, and theatre, supported by Gatsby. For this year, we have one Irish fellowship on offer. This is the Jerome Hines Fellowship. So this is for applicants whose practice or work is based in Ireland. I'm afraid it's not eligible for Northern Ireland applicants. So that's Jerome Hines, and there will be a specific Q&A session for Irish applicants later on in the month, if we've got any Irish applicants who are wishing to apply to Jerome Hines. We have a National Trust Fellowship for employees within the National Trust, and there is an internal application process there. Once your application is in, it's supported by the National Trust. Newly for this year as well, we also have a Tees Valley Fellowship. So Clore Leadership is delighted to be partnering on a major programme of work in Tees Valley. One part of that programme this year is a Tees Valley Fellowship for change makers who are based and working within the Tees Valley region. Transform Fellowship. This is for global majority, deaf, disabled and neurodivergent leaders. Who we know are underrepresented within cultural sector leadership as a whole. So the Transform Fellowship, which is supported by Arts Council England, is aimed at encouraging more applicants from those demographic groups. And then lastly, there is the opportunity for a self or employer funded fellowship. It's worth me saying that for that specific fellowship, the costs would need to be covered by either yourself or your employer. So you do need to have the funds in place. And the application process is exactly the same as for all our other fellowships. So you would need to meet the same criteria and undertake the same process as all other applicants. Next slide, please. So in terms of general eligibility criteria, I've spoke about this already. We're looking for a minimum of 7 years, except for the Accelerate Fellowships, which is 5 years. We're looking for some applicants who have got the ambition to lead and make impact through your work or practice. What that impact looks like will very much depend on you and your role. It might be that you are trying to influence an area of practice as an artist. It might be that you're influencing policy through a role as a strategic, working for a strategic body, or it might be that you're trying to influence and make change in an area of social justice within your work as well. What that impact looks like will very much depend on your area of work. We're looking for folk who've got commitment to and passion for and a real understanding of the cultural sector and its broader context. People who are really hungry to work in arts and culture and really committed to that. We're looking for folk who've got leadership potential. So it might be that in your particular role, you're ripe to step up into a next stage of your leadership, or it might be that you're ready to take on a bigger challenge as part of your artistic practice. So really, we're looking at that leadership potential. It's worth me saying that the fellowship is a really self-reflective process. It's driven by the individual and it involves lots of self-reflection. So we really do look for applicants who are curious about themselves, who are self-aware already. You might not have all the answers, but you're open and you're willing to explore finding those answers within yourself and in dialogue with others as well. We're also looking for folk who are able to influence practice or policy and affect change. So really able to make that step change to achieve leadership potential. And as I said a couple of times now, specialist fellowships do have additional criteria. So these are the general eligibility criteria, but please do read the specific criteria for the up to 2 fellowships you want to apply to before you put the application in. Next slide, please. So in terms of making your application, there are some changes to the process for this year. We did some consultation with previous applicants, so we have made some changes for this year's process. You go onto the Clore Leadership website and click into our application portal, which is open now. Before making your application, please do read the guide for applicants. This contains all the application questions, both at stage 1 and at stage 2. So you're able to use those and work offline referencing those questions. It also details the criteria. It also details the criteria for the individual fellowships, and it talks about, it also gives you all the deadline dates as well. So make sure you do read that guide before you make your application. So in terms of the process this year, we've got a stage 1 and a stage 2 application. So stage 1 is open at the moment. As part of that, you are invited to submit some answers to some questions. Tell us a little bit about your previous experience, give us an anonymized CV, and then there is an equal opportunities monitoring form that you will fill in as well. At this stage, you will also tell us which of up to 2 fellowships you're wishing to apply for and how you meet the eligibility for them. Closing date for stage 1 is the 8th of February. And then following on from that, all applications will be assessed, and there will be a number of applicants who will be shortlisted for stage 2. For stage 2, again, you'll be asked to provide some answers to some questions. And at stage 2 for this year only, you will be asked to provide the nominator. So it's a different process than in previous years. Nominator is only for those shortlisted through to stage 2. And the deadline for stage 2 applicants is the 27th of March. Following on from that, we will have, again, review and assessment, and there will be a shortlist who are invited to interview. And those interviews will take place in April and May, with decisions in June, ready to start fellowship in September 2024. We accept applications via the portal only. If you want to make your application in another format, it might be an audio submission, it might be that you want to submit a video, that's absolutely fine. As part of the portal, there's the option to flick a button and upload a file of your choice. However you want to submit your application is absolutely fine. Next slide, please. So some tips for applicants. Do read and digest our guide for applicants carefully. As I said previously, it's got all the questions that you will be asked are listed in that document. We do have a British Sign Language version of that document together with captions and audio on our website as well. So if you want to access that via BSL captions or audio, that's on the website. If you are then shortlisted through to stage 2, in choosing your nominator, please do get onto this nice and early. We have detailed this now. So if you want to speculatively identify a nominator, you can do so now. In terms of making your choice, we're not interested in it being a big swanky name, somebody famous. We are interested in the meat of what that nominator will say about you and your leadership potential. So do give them, time to be able to kind of write that nomination, but also get onto them good and early. But also choose carefully who that might be. It needs to be somebody who knows you, your leadership potential, what the impact of the fellowship will be for you. It doesn't need to be somebody who's really famous. So just saying that. In terms of tips as well, be brave and honest about who you are. As I've said, the fellowship is a really self-reflective program. It really is about looking at yourself inside for the answers. So be in writing your application, bear that in mind, and be brave and honest about who you are and what change-making leadership means for you. Be open to learning. So there are some questions as part of the application which ask you to kind of reflect on challenges and what you're hoping to learn. Really think about what it is that you want to learn about yourself. Where do you feel there are things for you to learn? And write as yourself. When I say write, it might be you submit a video. But in crafting your application, you are speaking as yourself. So we're not looking for funding speak or polished prose or all the kind of current terminology. You speak as yourself through your application in whatever format you may submit that. Next slide, please. So some key information. Stage 1 deadline is noon on the 8th of February. If you are shortlisted through to stage 2, the deadline is noon on the 27th of March. Decisions around the interview shortlist will come in mid-April. Interviews, April and May 2024, and you should be informed of the final outcome if you make through to the interview stage in June 2024. We can offer support and alternative formats. There are, as I said, there is a British Sign Language version of our guide on the website. If you need a copy of that information of our web information or the guide in large print or black and white contrast or another format, please do email us and we're happy to help. We have some of those formats already. But if you need us to make adjustments to that information, please just let us know. As I've said a couple of times now, the questions for both stages are detailed in the application guide. And regrettably, and it is with deep regret, because of the size of the team, we are unable to offer individual feedback at stage 1 or 2. But we do offer feedback for candidates who make it through to interview. Next slide, Ian. That's the end. We've come to the end. So I see that some of you have been pasting questions in the chat, and I will come to them, I absolutely promise. But what I'd like to do now is to hand over to alumni of the Clore Fellowship. So I'm going to come to Robyn first, if I may. And Robyn is a Clore Fellow, and she's going to introduce herself and talk a little bit about her experience on the fellowship. Over to you, Robyn.
Hello, everybody. I'm Robyn, obviously. I am a white woman in my late 30s with short hair and glasses. My pronouns are she, her. So it's really hard to know what's helpful to tell you about my time on the fellowship. But I think I'll, in a nutshell, kind of let you know where I was at when I started, the main things that I think it's kind of given me moving forward. And then perhaps if there's time at the very end for questions, I'm happy to kind of answer anything more specific. So when I applied, I was a freelance director at the helm of a micro organisation. So the organisation was essentially just me. And I had an idea, much like Amber, who I can see in the questions. I had ideas about how I wanted things to change, but I really felt like I just didn't know where to start. And I think that's completely fine as you kind of embark on your Clore experience, to feel like you do not know all of the answers, but that you have some sort of kind of passion or idea about what it might be that the cultural sector needs. The things that I would say were the most important kind of part of my experience on Clore, I mean, there's so many different elements to it, and I guess it's the coherence of the whole that makes it what it is. But I cannot kind of overemphasize the value of the cohort. Because of the way that Clore is structured, you build such deep relationships with people who are coming from all sorts of different disciplines and backgrounds and experiences and ages and kind of levels of seniority, which may sound weird when we're talking about leaders, but that the way that you sit as a leader within an ecosystem like the arts and culture sector, people can be coming from all different kind of levels of experience of what leadership means. And to this day, you know, we're on the WhatsApp group talking to each other about things that we think and things that we need from each other. It's an ongoing source of support for anyone who's done Clore. So I'd say that the cohort is an amazing thing, and the team do such a good job of creating a cohort who are going to build those relationships and support each other. I'd also say the fact it's self-led is really important. And I'm sure people who are in this Zoom room now are thinking, oh, I'm freelance, but I also do some work with organizations. And I don't know whether I quite kind of fit the profile of a Clore person. I would say there are around 7 freelancers, I think, on our cohort. And everybody else was from an organization, and there was space for each type of kind of background to flourish. So as a freelancer, I loved that I was able to design my own kind of leadership development, and that I had opportunities to talk to people who were working within organizations and being connected with people who are working in organizations to learn more about how I could apply that as a freelancer, but also as someone trying to run a small organization. I'd also say that Clore gives you a real sense of like empowerment to go and have your calling card. So just starting conversations with people you might not have necessarily felt that you could approach before. Clore kind of gives you, I don't know, a purpose and an accreditation, as it were, so that you can start to contact people who before it would have felt too speculative, or they perhaps might not have made the time. But actually, Clore gives you a real reason to get in touch and say, I'm working actively on my development as a leader, got these particular questions or these thoughts, would you talk to me? And I suppose, because I know time is quite short, I won't say too much more now. But again, if people have questions that are specific about my experience and how I built my kind of leadership program, happy to answer. But I would say there's a thing that Hilary, who's obviously full of wisdom, said to us around it being a time to be self-centered, not in the selfish sense, but in the way of centering an experience that you're curating yourself, that is professional development, but of course goes way further than that. That's why the relationships are so deep that we build, because it's so personal as well. Like, it's professional development, but it affects all parts of you. And I think there's something about that self-centered time that we never get in the arts and culture industry sector, and that it's 360 supported. And I don't mean just the 360 that happens at the start. I mean the fact that you've got your cohort, you've got the team, you've also got like a network of all the alumni from way back when. So it feels really supported whilst also being yours and personal. So that, I hope, gives you a kind of holistic sense of Clore and how it was for me. I'll hand over to Kate, who may be handing on to somebody else. And then, as I say, if there are more questions, happy to answer.
Thanks so much, Robyn. That's really, really helpful. Thank you so much for sharing your insights. I'm not going to hand over to somebody else because sadly they're not able to make it. We had another alumni, but he sent his well wishes, but he's not able to make it today.
I'm here.
Oh, there you are. Sorry, Adem. Somebody told me that you weren't here.
Sorry, I think I was using my stage name, Meeting Room 4B.
Meeting Room 4B. There you are. You're hiding in the corner. Adem, would you like to say a few words about your fellow? Apologies, I didn't see you.
No, it's fine. Sorry. Yeah, sure. Hi, I'm Adem. I think it's really similar to Robyn. For me, like, the connections to the people in the cohort was really, really special. I sort of came in to Clore. At the time, I was working part-time. As the music curator at the Holness, kind of doing ambitious programs that straddled like community engagement, participation, and an artistic practice, whilst also part-time working at the Arts Council. And I knew that I wanted to do something that to step into a leadership role, either at a large arts organisation or at a small one. And was kind of aware of like the alumni and the people that have done it, and thought this felt like it could be a really good opportunity for me to kind of crystallize some of that. But I came into Clore thinking that I would like become really good at business, because like, that's what I thought leaders must do. And almost within the first session we had, that was like completely challenged. I remember Dominique, who's on our cohort, said to me, do you think the reason you're not running an arts organisation is because you're not great at, I can't remember what she said, finance or spreadsheets or something. And actually then it became much more for me about becoming better at the things that I was good at and spending that time to go, which for me is like being creative and working with artists and creative people to make things happen. And so it became much more about that and how could I communicate that I was good at those things? How could I demonstrate that out into the sector? And how could I experiment with it a bit more? And it was really fun. I really enjoyed it. Happy to answer any questions as well.
Thanks, Adam. I'm so glad you're here, meeting room 4B. Thank you.
I don't know how to. Maybe it's a new stage name.
Or band. Love it. Great. So now is the part of the session where if we've got questions in the chat, I'm going to read them out and give an answer if I possibly can, or I might field them to either Robyn or Adem to answer as an alumni of the programme. So please do pop them in the chat if you want to. Some of them I think may have been answered already, but I will just double check in as we go.
Yeah.
So scroll. Okay, Hannah has asked, does 7 years experience need to be in senior roles or just from your career in general? Just in your career in general. So your kind of leadership per se, not in a senior role.
Well,
oh, I think we've got a little person. Would folks be able to just mute just while I go through the chat? That's brilliant. Dima has asked, so there are 24 fellowships. How many of these go to international fellowships? In other words, how many spots, I think, are available for UK applicants outside the ones funded by their own organisations? It's circa 24. We have funding for, I think it's up to 6 international fellows. So there is a slight kind of wiggle room around things year on year, but up to 6 is for the internationals. So the remainder will be for the UK and Ireland fellowships. Which Dima has also asked what kind of support you offer to apply for an AHRC research grant. Can you give us practical steps explanation for a previous successful fellow grant? In terms of the AHRC scheme even, that is something that there is a whole application process, you know, when it comes to that cycle. So there is a workshop that we offer to the fellows to support making an application. So there's some support offered there. And then obviously you would connect with your supervisor if you're awarded a research grant as well around writing the actual academic research piece. In terms of previous AHRC projects, this is where my mind goes completely blank, but there are lots of examples on the Clore Leadership website. There is a little resource which we've recently launched, a research library. So if you wanted to have a little nosy on the website, you'd be able to do so, Dima, to find out some of the research. My brain has gone completely blank in terms of the subjects. I don't know, Adem or Robyn, did either of you do the AHRC? Did you do a research project? No. Okay.
I didn't.
Dima, no.
Well,
Dima,
yeah, who did, but I didn't, I'm afraid.
Dima, have a little look at nosy on the website. You'll find some information there. Rhiannon has asked, can you clarify the definition of theatre for the Theatre Fellowship? I work across art form and currently working in a leadership role within circus and theatre. Previous leadership has been in a multi-art form venue, which included theatre. I think there is some flex within what definition of theatre. It could be commercial theatre, it could be publicly funded theatre, it can be sort of cross art form, but there does need to be, because it is a theatre fellowship, there does need to be a clear link, but there is some flexibility around art. Rebecca has said that they would also be interested in this question. I lead a participatory arts organisation, but probably wouldn't qualify for the Creative Engagement Fellowship as I'm already a CEO. Rebecca, if you're talking about the cultural learning, I would suggest that the Cultural Learning Fellowship encompasses not only front-facing delivery, you know, might be delivering workshops with participants, but also those who are in, you know, maybe senior management roles or could be, you know, any kind of role where that has a specialism, where your role has a specialism in that area. Sherelle has asked, are the leadership applications ranging in various disciplines of arts and humanities? How will the mentorship workshop cater to each interest? I think if I've understood your question correctly, and Sherelle, if I don't answer this from the angle that you're coming at, please do ping us an email afterwards, and I'm happy to kind of go back on the question. But you're asking, how does the learning flex around difference in areas of practice? I think one of the things is that the content very much is about you as a leader, as an individual, not necessarily the art form you're working on. I think, I don't know whether Adem and Robyn would agree, but the conversation that you may have within the cohort and the experiences and insights, you might have someone from heritage, you might have someone who works in a gallery, you might have freelance artists. Those combined experiences will inform the learning that you as a leader take away, and there may be insights from different sectors, but the learning, the content is about you as a leader. I'm hoping I've answered that question in an all right way, Sherelle, but if not, please do ping us an email. I don't know, Robyn or Adem, if you've got any thoughts on that.
Do you, Adem? Like, I would just agree that, like, it's entirely, so whatever is put in front of your cohort, and that will be curated in response to who is that cohort, like whatever that is, it's actually how you as a cohort respond to it. So in a way, it's how you flex around a subject just as much as it is how you apply a kind of more personally based session in practice. So it's about your response in some ways.
Thanks, Robyn. I've got a couple of questions here about art form specific fellowships. Hannah is asking whether there is one for music, and then Jess is asking about literature and publishing. With regret, we don't have art form specific ones for those two sectors. As I said at the beginning, we are slightly limited in terms of art form around the requirements of our funders. That said, there are some more general fellowships which may be targeted, so if you were, for instance, working in music in Tees Valley, that's where an applicant may be able to apply. Or if you are deaf, disabled, neurodivergent, or from the global majority, then you'd be eligible for the Transform Fellowship. So with regret, we don't have a music specific one, and we don't have literature or publishing due to our own funding. MN has asked, what if you have been working in a self-employed capacity for 7+ years with an organisation but have recently left? Are you still eligible? I think if there's been a change in your circumstance, but you've got the track record and you have the commitment going forward, and it's just a question of you being in a career break at the moment, that's not problematic. If your experience has been in, I don't know, dance, and you haven't not yet entered into creative learning, that might be a little bit more problematic, because you do need to be able to demonstrate that experience. But yeah, we understand that career breaks happen, especially at the moment. You know, the situation is tough within arts and culture, and there is some fluidity in employment as well. So yeah, we are understanding and sympathetic of that. Jamie is asking, would it be appropriate for someone to apply for both Accelerate and another fellowship if they were unsure as to whether their experience represented 5 or 7 years? And would there be a way of getting some feedback on a CV to understand whether one is considered? Yeah, Jamie, if you wanted to get a steer on whether we would consider you to meet the eligibility of the Accelerate, we'd be happy to do that if you wanted to send the CV over. And certainly if you wanted to go for Accelerate and say an art form specific one, you know, Accelerate and theatre, that's absolutely fine. Hannah, in terms of Accelerate, would you class someone who has taken on significant leadership responsibility into account, even if they'd been working across a number of roles? I think we would need to consider what number of those roles were. We'd be looking at your leadership experience, your change making experience. So not necessarily, you know, being in a senior role at the helm of an organization, but making change in wherever you have been working. Helen has asked, if you don't meet any of the criteria, so for example, they live in Scotland and work in the craft sector, can you only apply for the self-employer funded? With regret, if you're not meeting the eligibility criteria of the specific fellowships or ones that are targeted at particular groups, unfortunately, yes, if you're not meeting the criteria, I'm afraid we are limited within the parameters of our funders somewhat as to what we're able to support in terms of the specific fellowships. Hannah has asked, do you have a number or percentage of people you're expecting to take through to stage 2? We don't at the moment. This is we've just changed the application process, so it's slightly unknown at the moment. So no, we don't at this stage. What would you define as the line? Sorry, Jamie is asking, what would you define as the line between working in the sector and leading in it? Would, for example, providing consultation, training and development in one's area of practice count towards the years of leadership, or would that be seen as too early career? I'm hoping I've kind of sort of answered this a little bit previously, but by leadership, Clore is really interested in change making. Are you interested in making a change in what area you're working within and beyond through your work? So you might not be line managing a team, you might not be doing consultancy, you know, leading others externally to your organization, but you might be making quiet change from within your own area of practice or your own organization, and that could be from within. Are you influencing others in whatever area? So change making is really what we're interested in. And if you want to, Jamie, if you wanted to have a chat about what level of experience you think you have, I think it was you that asked the question about CV. Happy to have a kind of side conversation about that as well. And just to say, if anybody's feeling like they're a little unsure where they sit, whether their work kind of feels like it's leadership related, then we're happy to have a conversation with you individually if that's helpful to you as well. Amber has asked, please, can you speak to the balance between having a clear idea of the change you want to make in the sector and the fact that Clore is a way to help shape and formulate your thinking around this? I'm approaching this at a moment of career transition and I know the broad direction of travel, but I'm also interested in this process as a way to focus deeply on what is needed and how I can contribute to it. Yes, that is entirely, let me just check your name, Amber. That is very, very true, Amber. For some fellows, they might have a really clear idea about where that, you know, the change, the leadership potential might go. For others, the fellowship process itself is useful to unpick that. I would encourage you to speak frankly about where you're at in that process for yourself in the application. And also what I would say is in designing the questions, we're hoping that the reflective nature of the things asked in the application are useful to leaders as well, to help interrogate, you know, who they are and where they feel that they would like to go with their leadership. Do you cross-reference applications with any previous core clause participation? We would do a cross-check, yes, just to get a sense of where people may have been on a previous program as well. That was DJN who was asking. How many cultural learning fellowships? Michelle has asked that question, and Michelle, I don't know off the top of my head, so that's Clore team, can we make a note to answer that one, please, after today's session, and we'll post that on the website. Apologies, I have lots of numbers in my head, and that's not one of them today. Rachel has asked, where did Robyn and Adem do their secondments, and why did they choose these organisations? Adem, would you take that one? Or Robyn? Robyn's popped up.
Oh, yes, but Adem, do you want to speak first?
Yeah, I mean, I'm probably not the case study actually for secondments because we, in the spirit of like creating a learning experience that suited where I was at and what I did, instead of doing kind of a full secondment, which again, Kate probably explained, this is not the model, looked at doing a series of other things where I could do a bit more experimenting. And I was really interested in organizations that make their own work at scale. So I spent a bit of time with a few different large organizations, actually some opera organizations, which is well out of my comfort zone, to kind of understand how they make and how they work with audiences, so that I can apply that to some of the work that I was doing. So a bit of a hatchet job really to my secondment. Robyn, what was yours like?
Well, it was, so I remember it being a slightly strange year because we were half COVID stricken and half not. But I remember that I was able to do some study visits that I found really instructive. One of which was to Watershed in Bristol. And I had spent a lot of my fellowship investigating kind of how we can strengthen the kind of exchange of people and ideas and audiences and funding between the stage, screen and immersive industries. So when it came to the secondment, after much kind of negotiation to try and get me into a really cool, it was a production company that has its own kind of inbuilt training system, and I was really fascinated by the kind of ecosystem they built. We didn't manage to pull it off, but I did go to Screen Skills, where I then got to learn about a lot of kind of virtual production work, and where that is going to be taking the entertainment sector and how that relates to what the cultural sector might do when it looks for kind of funding models to sustain itself. Very long-winded, but also gives you a flavour of some of the kind of questions you can use your fellowship to ask.
Thanks both. Just to give you a sort of smorgasbord of examples of where fellows are on secondment this year, we have got fellows on secondment at Kew Gardens, with Arts Council. Here's my mind going blank again.
We had a fellow here. Sorry, I work at the South Bank Centre now. And we hosted a fellow this year as well.
Yeah, I mean, the list is kind of really interesting, kind of variety of different art form areas, size, flavours of organisations, types of work, really interesting. So yeah, lots of different examples, and just apologies that my brain is a little bit tired today. I'm going to quickly, because we're coming toward the end of the session, so I'm going to try and answer a couple of remaining questions. Frances is asking, is there help for writing the application? As I said, we'd be happy to have a side conversation with an applicant if they need a little bit of steer. So please do drop us a line if that is of help. Jenny has asked about, it's the same question about secondments. Nat has asked for a definition of an organisation, and is there a preference for traditional arts bodies or over more commercial? No, there isn't. We see arts and culture as all encompassing, both commercial as well as statutory funded, publicly funded. Elise has asked, are they missing something obvious? But is the expectation you continue to work full time outside of the 6-week placement and residential? No. Generally what happens is a fellow will take time away from their day job, be it as a freelancer or self-employed or with an organisation, and that is what the bursary, the £14,000, is there to support with. Some fellows may go part-time, some may dip a toe back in and out of work a little bit, but what we're trying to encourage is a period of learning and reflection, so 2 step away. So that is what the bursary is there to support the costs of, be it backfill for your employer, or time for loss of earnings or living costs for freelancers. So there is some flexibility about how you kind of manage that time away from work, but the idea is not that you're trying to ram in a fellowship alongside the full-time job for that period, because that just wouldn't be possible. It is quite full on. There is a lot of activity, both the whole cohort stuff, but also the things that you undertake individually. Okay, I think I have accidentally scrolled to the beginning. I can see that we've got quite a few questions still remaining, and we're 1 minute over, and I'm very mindful of people's time. So What we shall do is, if I haven't got to your question, we will endeavour to answer those and pop up a sheet on the website which kind of responds. I'll check through the ones that we've got to and any that I don't think we have, and we will put that on the website following today's session. And if you want to have an individual conversation with one of us, or if it's a quick question, you can pop us an email, fellowships@cloreleadership.org, and we will come back to you. Thank you so much, Robyn, Adem. Thank you so much for giving us your time today. Thank you for coming along to hear more about the fellowships. I'm looking forward to receiving applications from you. And if we can help, please do reach out to us. Go well for the rest of your day. It's been lovely to see you.